Hi, I'm Silver Rain Runningcloud, and this is What It Takes to Be Great. And today my guest is Carl Douglas. Carl E. Douglas, Esquire, is probably best known as the OJ attorney. And he was one of my classmates at Northwestern. I remember the day that I met Carl. I thought he was a very shy and polite gentleman. And I never would have imagined that he'd be such a lion in the courtroom and a real living legend. So I'm very proud and very happy to present my friend Carl today to talk about his life, what he's doing right now, the legacy that he represents, and some things like that. First, let me tell you a little bit about him. Carl grew up in California, and he started in government work at first with the Federal Communications Commission. And when the politics changed, he felt that his services to the community would be better heard working in California for the Public Defender's Office. In 1995, he was with Johnny Cochran's firm, and that's when the OJ case took place. And Carl stayed with Johnny Cochran until 1998, when he left and launched his own law firm. Since he has had his own law firm, well, I'm not sure about this timeline, but one of the remarkable things after the OJ case, that was pretty remarkable in itself, but then he had a record-breaking settlement case against GM. That he can tell us a little more about later. It was the largest verdict in history. So Carl has had some of the biggest cases in the criminal and civil arenas. Now his work is primarily as a civil rights attorney. And he's done work for Michael Jackson, O.J. Simpson, just a who's who list of celebrities. And I'm so excited. Welcome, Carl. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
I was wondering, when we were at Northwestern, what was your major?
I was a political science major in college. It's funny because I had never seen snow before going to Chicago, and it was quite an adjustment for me as well.
Oh my goodness. And what was it like for you growing up?
My family was a middle-class family. My father was a technical writer for Bechtel. My mother worked for Western Airlines then as a supervisor for reservationists. So I was very, very fortunate because I never really wanted for anything. It was me and my older sister. And I remember when I was 8 years old, my father moved our family from an apartment in the inner city of Los Angeles to a house in the outskirts of Los Angeles. And I remember that we were the third Black family on the street there in the early 1960s. We had a really comfortable living for most of my life.
I see. And when you were younger, who do you remember admiring as a role model?
It's funny because the primary hero in my life was Cassius Clay, who became Muhammad Ali. I admired him because he was a fearless advocate for the rights of all. And I also admired him because he talked a good game and then he'd back it up. And that was always a trait that I tried to follow throughout my personal and professional careers.
Did you have a favorite professor at Northwestern?
Oh boy, that's an interesting question. While I enjoyed my time there, most of my classes were large survey classes, and there weren't a lot of opportunities for me to relate and to connect with professors. I probably remember that the most impactful professor to me was an African-American professor named Douglas Johnson. He was very charismatic. He taught me a lot about Black cosmology and a way of looking at the world through an African-American perspective. And at that time, it was very eye-opening. I tell my friends and colleagues that I became Black at Northwestern because it taught me some of the more difficult things of racial division. As you can remember, and I'm sure you'll agree, Chicago was a very racist city in many ways in those days. And I had not really encountered abject racism in Los Angeles. So it was a new thing for me moving to Chicago and living there and just dealing with some of the racial aspects that existed in the city of Chicago. So that was very much an eye-opening time for me.
That's very interesting, Carl. One thing that's always interesting is how diverse our backgrounds are. Although racially we're classified the same, we all have very different kinds of backgrounds. Because I thought everyone would have known about racism by then, even though I learned a great deal about racism in college myself. I've heard you speak to me before about the bias of race and class in our judicial system, Carl. How do you think race and class affects legal outcomes?
You know, regrettably, everything that happens in our criminal and legal justice system is still impacted far too much by the twin terrors of race and capitalism. You know, money, as much as one's race, plays a critical role on whether you're going to be arrested, whether you're going to spend time in jail, and how much time you're going to spend in jail. I know here in California, and most of my professional career has been practicing in the courts of California, racism is still a very important factor that every lawyer who practices in Los Angeles, where I am, has to consider, or they will not do so to their peril. Whenever I go into a courtroom, I am mindful of who my witnesses are. I am mindful of what experts I may choose to retain, and I factor in the racial component of my jury pool in all of those factors. But if the O.J. Simpson trial taught me anything, it also taught me about how capitalism and one's economic plight in life can have as great an influence on one's ability to be successful in the criminal justice system as one's race. It is indeed unfortunate, particularly in the case of O.J. Simpson. Not only was he Black, but O.J. had the resources, the money, if you will, to defend against himself, against the awesome power of the state of California. He was able to hire the best lawyers to represent him. He was able to hire the best experts, and he was able to hire the best investigators so that he had a team that was able to fight against the awesome power of the state. One thing that showed me from the O.J. Simpson trial was how deficient many of the public defender offices across this great nation of ours really is, and how that is the real challenge moving forward, being able to fund those offices so that those that don't have the resources are able to combat the awesome power of the state that is against them.
I see, thank you. That brings me to a question. Carol Bourne was a 1977 School of Journalism advertising major. And when we talked, she asked me to ask you two questions in particular. And one is there a future where Black people receive justice and fair treatment?
It's funny because I am always an optimist. I don't think I would be able to toil every day in this system if I were not optimistic for a brighter day in the future. It is indeed a struggle. Sometimes now, particularly with our current administration in Washington, We think that struggle is one that is destined to be defeated. But I remain optimistic. The glass for me is always half full. And while it may be a challenge, I look forward to one day where a man will not be judged by the color of his skin, but rather by the content of his character. That day is not yet, but I'm hopeful that day will come in the near future.
Well, it sounds like you've kind of answered Carol's next question for you, and that is, how did the civil rights movement affect you? You just quoted Dr. King, so how did the civil rights movement affect you, Carl?
You know, it has affected me to my very core. I am a student of the affirmative action movement. When I was considering colleges, it was considered to be a bright test of one's future to be able to be accepted at a majority white institution as an African American and to be able to succeed in that environment. It's funny because me and many of my colleagues who are similarly aged now look to sending our children to historically Black universities. I wanted to make sure, for example, that my son went to Morehouse because I thought that would be the best experience for him to prepare him for life in the future. But in my age and in my generation, affirmative action was not a bad thing. It was something that we wore proudly on our chest, and it really encouraged, empowered us to succeed in the white man's world. So civil rights has always played an important part of my life, being raised as I've grown up through the system, and I've continued to adopt that responsibility to try to make the world better for others who come behind me.
I see. Well, would you like to tell us about the Jonathan Hart case? To start, we're going to talk about three of your current cases. Would you like to tell us about the Jonathan Hart case and the boycott Walgreens movement?
Let me tell you about some cases that have recently been I've been involved with, even more than the three that we spoke about earlier. One is an interesting case against Walgreens, and it's a civil rights case based on the notion that Walgreens was one of the largest corporations in the world. Walgreens made more than $131 billion last year. And Walgreens, which has more than 9,500 stores in the United States, also has more than 640 stores in California, at least 54 stores in LA County where I live. And Walgreens has a problem with shoplifting. And so in order to deal with the problem of shoplifting, the executives of Walgreens, which is headquartered in Deerfield, Illinois, right outside Chicago, decided to deal with their problem of shoplifting in two ways. One, they decided to increase the number of surveillance cameras in the stores. And they put monitors around the stores for everyone to know that they were on camera. And two, they decided to hire guards to help patrol some of these stores. In Los Angeles, unfortunately, out of the 54 stores that are there in LA County, Walgreens chose to hire armed guards in just 4 of those stores. We found that those 4 stores where there are armed guards are in the Black community, the Latin community, and also a community that caters much to the homeless population in Los Angeles, which is primarily Black and Latin. You know, I take the position that if a corporation chooses to hire an armed guard in one of their stores, it's foreseeable that at some point that armed guard is going to fire a weapon. And if a multi-billion-dollar corporation chooses to protect its property by having armed guards, it's foreseeable that one of those armed guards firing their weapon will fire their weapon and strike someone unintentionally. Well, on December 2nd of 2018, Jonathan Hart, who is a gay, homeless Black man, went into a Walgreens store in Hollywood at Sunset and Vine, which is the flagship store in Southern California for Walgreens. He went in there with two other African-American, gay, homeless men as well. And almost immediately upon being inside that store, they were profiled by an armed security guard that was there. They were followed around the store, and the men complained about what they thought was harassment and being profiled because of their race, because they were of a sexual orientation that was contrary to the mores of the store or of that security guard, and also because they were homeless. Jonathan Hart was 21 years old at the time. At some point, the guard walked up to him and he objected to the guard getting into his personal space. And he kind of pushed the guard back, pushing him on the head. The guard in return then pushed Jonathan with both his hands away. And Jonathan turned and began walking away to go out the back door of that store. For some reason that we can still not understand, the guard then crouched down, pulled out his handgun, pointed the gun at Jonathan as he's walking away, and ordered Jonathan to freeze. Jonathan continued walking toward the door, and the guard fired one shot, striking Jonathan in the back of his neck and killing him. We're representing Jonathan's legal guardians and his twin sister, and we have sued Walgreens for $525 million. Now, so that might sound like a lot of money to most of us, but to Walgreens, a corporation that made more than $1.3 billion that year, that is less than 0.5% of their earnings in the year. And we are having a boycott Walgreens, and we use the hashtag MASA to make America safe again, because by our lawsuit, we are hoping to change the culture of Walgreens one store at a time. The shooter in that case was recently charged with second-degree murder by the district attorney here in Los Angeles County. She's an African-American woman, and she and I happen to have gone to the same high school. But she has shown the force to charge that shooter with second-degree murder, and he currently is on bail under a $3 million bail. So we are hopeful as this case works its way through both the criminal and the civil justice system that Jonathan Hart will not have died in vain.
That is a very, very sad story. We are living in a world where shoplifters are going to be murdered, and the officer actually got on a knee like a sniper shot. That's just terrible.
He came into a crouch, and he crouched down and pointed his gun and said, "Freeze." And it's really disgusting when you think about it, because Walgreens doesn't sell any electronics. They don't sell any jewelry. They don't sell any expensive perfumes. They sell vitamins. They sell makeup. And whatever expensive alcohol that they have is locked under a key. And a team member has to unlock the case. So there's really no need for them to have armed guards. And I dare say, Silver, they don't have armed guards, I suspect, where the executives' families in Deerfield shop. They don't have armed guards where the executives' mothers shop. And I dare say they don't have armed guards where the children of those executives shop. So our goal is to take Walgreens to task for their despicable choices. And this is in many ways similar to the General Motors case that I was involved with in the late 90s.
Is this the one with the largest settlement in the history of personal injury settlements?
It was the largest verdict in 1999, the year of that case in the United States. There have now been larger verdicts since then, but in 1999, it was the largest. And it was large because we were able to prove that the executives of General Motors made a conscious decision to put profit over safety. They knew that their gas tanks were positioned 11 inches behind the rear bumper. And that was a case where they could have spent $6 per car to put a fix so that a rear-ending crash would not cause the rear bumper to enter the gas tank and cause an explosion. In that case involving a family, Patricia Anderson and her 4 children, their car was rear-ended and there was an explosion. And because General Motors made a conscious decision of putting profits over safety, the jury found that conduct despicable. Here, Walgreens executives have made a conscious decision to put armed guards in but 4 of its 54 stores in LA County. And we're going to explore and ask questions, and I think there'll be an inevitable conclusion that these guards were placed there because there are Black and brown customers that frequent those stores. And it's really despicable because it's not like the Hollywood store where Jonathan was shot had a rash of armed guards or armed robberies or something that would cause there to be the need for armed guards. We were able to get figures from the LAPD, and the #1 cause for police intervention at that store is people grabbing some food and running out the door because it caters to a large homeless population. You see, there are 55,000 homeless people in LA County, probably second only to New York, and 7,000 are homeless youth who are between the ages of 15 and 25, who tend to gather in the Hollywood area because there are a lot of shelters there, and there's a community there that accepts them for whatever their sexual orientation may be, so they can live and they can live in that community with some sense of peace and understanding.
Well, Carl, I just don't know when we as a society decided that guards are allowed to execute people who haven't even stolen, but even if they did steal, even if they stole 10 bags of Cheetos, Carl, 10 whole bags of Cheetos, we don't kill them. We don't just kill them. This is just genocide.
It's so outrageous because we've been able to confirm at the moment that Jonathan had his California ID card in his hand when he was shot. And I surmised he was trying to prove to the guard who he was, that he wasn't some shoplifter, and that he had a right to be there and be able to shop in peace. There's no shoplifter that would be holding an ID card in his hand as he was trying to walk away from a guard that he thought was profiling and harassing him. So that's just one of the many cases that we're working on. But it's
outrageous. Well, Carl, will tell us, that kind of is a good segue to talking about Dr. Molina Abdullah and the work that you're doing on her case. If you could just let people know who she is, what she's about, and how you're helping her now, that'd be great.
Sure. Dr. Molina Abdullah is a leader, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter here in Los Angeles. She's the chairman of the Department of Pan-African American Studies at Cal State Los Angeles, a major university here in LA. And she is a vocal opponent to the police commission and the police department and the rash of shootings that we've had in Los Angeles over my entire lifetime of unarmed African American and Latin young men and women here in Los Angeles. As many of your listeners may know, we've had a decades-old problem of excessive force between the police department here and the Black and brown communities. And Dr. Molina Abdullah has been a vocal opponent at police commission meetings about things that would be going on involving the police. On May 8th of this year, she was arrested for, we say, Black protest. And she was wrongfully accused of grabbing a police officer's hand and holding him while he was trying to escort out another protester from that commission meeting. They charged Dr. Molina with 8 separate misdemeanor counts, 6 for disrupting public meetings and 2 for assault and battery. On her behalf, we were able to learn that, for example, she and 2 other white protesters were all arrested at the same time for failing to lead a commission meeting. The 2 white women were escorted out by police officers. Only she was handcuffed and arrested, although all of them had been signaled for disrupting the meeting. Only she was charged with the crime, and the other 2 white women were not.
That's so blatant.
There was a separate occasion when she and an Indian protester were both identified and escorted out because they were disrupting a separate meeting. And again, only she was charged with the crime, and the Indian protester was not charged.
You mean a Southeast Asian person?
Someone from Pakistan or India.
Yes, okay, yes. Oh
So
my goodness, they got off, but we didn't. Oh.
So we filed a motion
Oh.
to dismiss the charges against her, alleging that the city attorney of Los Angeles had selectively prosecuted her, not only because of her race, but because she was a political activist. And I am pleased to say that just this past Thursday, we were able to reach an agreement with the city attorney's office that in 6 months' time, all of the charges against Dr. Molina Abdullah will be dismissed. And as importantly, we were able to change the culture so that now, if you are directed to leave a police commission meeting, you'll be escorted out, but you will not be handcuffed and arrested and charged with a crime. And so this is a major victory, not just for Dr. Abdullah, but for all fair-minded people who want to protest at police commission meetings. So we are very, very pleased and proud of the result that we were able to render on her behalf just last Thursday. And I encourage—
Congratulations, Carl. That's wonderful news.
It was a great victory on our behalf, and you can Google it and find it on social media as well.
All right. Well, congratulations. That's outstanding. My goodness. So much racism is so blatant. That just seems to be an underlying current in a lot of your work. I guess that's why you've become focused so much on civil rights. So let me ask you a little bit of a question. You've done some work with for the ladies of the sorority, and there's been recent news about that same sorority. And it seems strange to me that one sorority keeps getting reported for and accused of things. So how do you feel about this effect?
Well, one of the hidden secrets of Black collegiate life is the continuation of hazing among African American fraternities and sororities. Many years ago, I represented one of the families of two members of the AKA sorority. They were potential members. They were, in fact, members of the sorority at Cal State Los Angeles, the same university where Dr. Abdullah now works. And two women drowned in the ocean during what we said was a hazing ritual. And we uncovered during that investigation that there's an entirely underground network at many universities and colleges across this nation of underground hazing. Clearly, hazing is universally condemned by the Pan-Hellenic Council, which governs Greek organizations in all universities across this nation. But there is still, particularly in the African-American fraternities and sororities, an underground nature of hazing that still goes on. It's like you're only considered a paper member of our chapter if you are able to cross those sands and not be hazed. And there's an underground network that still goes on even today. Regrettably, I'm informed that there was a recent death out here at the University of California, Riverside, where a potential member of the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity was in fact injured and died under what are considered suspected circumstances. And so it is regrettable that the problem still continues. Now, I'll be clear, it is not just with African-American fraternities and sororities. It's not just with the AKAs or the Alphas, and it's not just with Black fraternities and sororities. It goes on too much, and it often surrounds itself around alcohol, and there are often deadly consequences, and it continues to be a problem that we must continue to fight.
Thank you, Carl. Are you married? Do you have children? Are you married with children?
I am divorced with one son. As I say, my son is a Morehouse grad. He is a paralegal in my office, and he is continuing to follow his dreams of one day becoming an actor or a comedian.
Oh my goodness, a Morehouse.
Yeah, yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you became so successful, and then I just want you to tell me a little bit about Michael Jackson. But is it important to set goals? Do you attribute goal setting to one of your success techniques?
It's funny. I do consider always pushing forward and setting goals. But one of my things that I've done virtually every day of my life since I was 9 years old is I read the newspaper every day. And I'm old school, so even now I get a physical paper that I'm able to hold in my hands, open the pages, and read all the articles. I don't read every article. In fact, I probably skim more than most of the articles except for the sports section and the local. But reading the paper every day and reading the headlines and reading those stories that interest me, I would think has been the greatest credit for my success and for my being able to talk about a wide range of topics and keeping me informed as a trial lawyer. You see, I'm a lawyer who practices both civil cases and criminal cases. And it's important as a trial lawyer that I'm aware of those trends and those things that my jury will know about, so I can better relate to them so that they can more easily follow my understanding and my view of the case, and hopefully so that I can better persuade them to come on my side of whatever the trial is. So if I would have one piece of advice for your listeners of how to be great, I would tell them it's important to stay informed. And people may not be as old school as me of looking at a physical newspaper every day, but it's very important that you find out about the news. And I would say that you find out more than through Facebook or more than through Twitter. There are a host of different sites these days so that there's no real excuse for anyone not to be up on a wide range of topics and subjects that are part of the national conversation.
Thank you. What about wealth building and financial skills? Do you think that parents should teach children how to manage money and how to create wealth because our schools aren't doing it? Do you think that's an important thing for people to know?
I think wealth building is an important skill that everyone needs to understand and to adopt. I tell my son all the time that life is a marathon and not a sprint. Particularly in this age of social media, people now want instant gratification. They want to get everything now. If they have a question, they will Google it and get a response.
Yeah, Google.
But with wealth building, it is indeed a marathon and not a sprint. And you have to start now building a nest egg for the future.
Do you think college is the best way up the social and economic ladder?
I think college certainly is one way. It's not necessarily the only way, and it is not necessarily for everyone, but it probably provides the greatest door that most people can walk through in their efforts to attain self-sufficiency and sustenance, not only for themselves, but for their families and for their future. I live not just for myself, I live for my family, and I live for my future and the future of my people, and that's the human race, because they need each of us to do our part to make the world better for all of us.
That's beautifully said, Carl. Thank you. Let me ask you, what did Johnny Cochran think of you?
I have a photograph in my office. That is the one photograph of all of the 9 members of O.J. Simpson's legal defense team. We gathered on one Saturday and took a portrait for all of us. And I was able to go around and get all 9 lawyers to autograph or sign my photograph. It's the only photograph that everyone has signed. And I remember Johnny Cochran said to me, "To my main man who always makes me look good." Because my goal was never to be the man in front. I always enjoyed being the man or woman who whispered in the ear of the man. That to me was always the seat of power. And that Johnny would write that I was always the one that made him look good is the highest compliment, because he achieved great things and I was one member of the team that helped him achieve those great things. And when our boat rose, everyone on board was able to enjoy the benefits of being on top.
That's wonderful. And did you meet Michael Jackson?
When I was employed in Johnny Cochran's office for 12 years. And in 1993, I had the pleasure of first meeting Michael Jackson when our office was hired to represent him because he was accused by the first of his young friends. And it's funny because Michael was 3.5, 4 years younger than me at the time. And I was one of the first African-American professionals that were ever working for him.
Wow.
He and most of his lawyers, most of his managers at that time were Caucasian and were older. So I was one of the first professionals that were of his age and that looked like him. And we continued a relationship legally over the next 10 years or so. Even after I stopped working for Johnny Cochran, I continued as an unpaid advisor for Michael Jackson. And there were some times, for example, when Johnny was sick with his illness, that he called me to try to meet with Michael so that we could try to make things better for Michael. Michael was a genius in so many ways, but he was also a prisoner. And it was very sad because he was a prisoner of his own celebrity. Because he was such a worldwide phenom, he was like a prisoner in his own home who could not go out.
Wow.
Because he was a celebrity at a young age, he never had a real childhood. And that was really the reason behind his Neverland Ranch. He had missed his childhood, and he wanted to recapture that childhood and to provide a childhood for other kids who would not able to have their own kind of childhood. And so his ranch at the time was like an amusement park. We went there probably 6 or 8 times over the course of our representing him, and we would bring kids from churches in Los Angeles by the busloads.
Wow.
He had rides. He had a game room that had all of the greatest amusement games. He had a zoo with giraffes. He had a staff of 100 just to care for the animals and to keep up the grounds. Now, unfortunately, that was something that could not exist forever. And part of his downfall was having to maintain the massive expenses that that ranch made for his professional lifestyle. So ultimately, that could not sustain itself forever. But he was a genius. He was very, very shy. He was very, very protective of his privacy. When he would call me at home, he would first disguise his voice. Hey, it's Carl Douglas. And once I would say, yeah, he'd say, hi, Carl, this is Michael. But he really was a musical genius, and the world is better because of his time here on Earth.
That's so exciting, Carl. Do you think that his estate still owns the Beatles catalog? That was a pretty wise business move. Some people think that put him on the hit list to get that media smear.
I remember when his advisors were contemplating making that purchase. And there were some that were saying the price was too high. But I remember his other music lawyers advising him about the wisdom of that move. And that was able to sustain him for many years, particularly toward the last 8 to 10 years of his life. He was not out making music at the same pace as before. He was not performing in concerts as he had earlier in his life during the Victory Tour in the 80s, etc. And so that music catalog was the foundation that he was able to leverage that sustained him for many, many years. It was by far the wisest investment that he ever made. And it's so regrettable that after his death, his estate has now made hundreds of millions of dollars because of just the love that his fans have had for him, even in his death, and his legacy will live on forever, I'm sure.
I think so too. But yours too, Carl. Books have been written with you as a subject in it. Movies, documentaries have been made about your life. Do you think the representations of you in the media and in the entertainment industry are fair ones?
Well, some would say that there's no such thing as bad publicity, and that the only thing worse than bad publicity is no publicity, particularly for someone like me as a lawyer who has always been in the public eye. I don't worry that much about how I am perceived in the media or how I may be perceived in books and movies. I wasn't one who was raised on social media, so I don't tie my view of my own self and my view of my own self-worth on what others may say, particularly now in the age of social media, where anyone with a cell phone can troll you or can say harmful things about you. There is a group of people who I hold dear, the staff at my firm at Douglas Hicks Law, the members of my family, my close friends and colleagues. Those are the ones that I care and worry about. But I've been very blessed because I've always been the man whispering in the ear of the man for much of my life. I have not always been the main subject of any castigations or bad publicity. So I've been very lucky. And I've also been very mindful about how everything that I do can impact not only my life, but the lives of others. It's a wonderful thing to be respected in my community. I was out at a function last night, and it is so nice that people will come up to me and give me praise for the work that I'm doing and saluting how important it is that my work helps our community. And it's not because I can sing or rap well. It's not because I have a great jump shot or I can run fast. It's because I am a lawyer. And that is the greatest joy of all, that I can use my profession to make the world better for others. And so that brings me great joy and gratitude. And I prefer to focus on the positive and not dwell on the negative.
That's really beautiful, Carl. Thanks for saying that. Do you plan to make any books about your life to tell your point of view? Is that something you're planning to do?
It's funny that you should ask, because throughout my entire legal career, I've been a lawyer now for 39 years. I have always saved clippings from my past with the intent of writing my memoir at some point in the future. And I'm looking now as I cross those burning sands of 60 plus years to do that. I have at least one, if not two, books in me, and I am very much hopeful and looking forward to doing that. I've had very, very lucky times in my life to have worked on one of the biggest criminal cases, one of the biggest civil cases, and I continue to do things that I hope will inspire others to work and do greatness for themselves. And so, yes, doing a book or two is something that I certainly strongly look forward to doing sometime soon.
That is good to hear. Now, I don't want to keep you too long because I know you're busy. Thanks so much for being so generous with your time. But I do want you to talk a little bit about the case you have against EA Sports. Because I love The Sims, and I want to know, what did they do wrong?
EA Sports is another multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they put on tournaments around the country where people can play different games, like Madden football. In fact, I was watching my TV last weekend, and there were two guys playing Madden football against each other, and there was an arena full of people just watching them play on big screens.
Yeah, that's called esports. It's a big international thing. They actually call themselves athletes.
Correct. And they can have as many as 25,000 paid customers who will fill an arena an esports arena and watch people play. I represent the family of Elijah Clayton. Elijah was an esports gamer, and EA Sports rated him as the 5th best football gamer in the country based on their own ratings.
Wow.
In August of 2018, there was a Madden tournament at a small restaurant in Jacksonville, Florida. EA Sports paid to bring Elijah from his home in Los Angeles to Jacksonville to take part in that tournament. It was a double elimination tournament, meaning each gamer, if they lost 2 times over the weekend, they were then out of the tournament, and the winners would then prevail at the end. There was one guy that played this guy who lost on Saturday. Elijah Clayton played him on Sunday, and he lost on Sunday. That person then went out to his car, got his backpack, came back into the restaurant, and began shooting up the restaurant and killed 2 people and injured 26 others. Elijah Clayton.
Has he lost a video game, Carl?
Apparently so. He then took his own life, so we'll never know the reason why he did this. But the first person that was shot and killed was the guy that beat him on Saturday. And the second person shot and killed was my client, Elijah Clayton, who had played and beat him on Sunday. So we are suing EA Sports. We are suing the restaurant where it took place. We are suing the landlords there because they had inadequate safety measures in place. The police department was never even notified that this tournament was taking place at this mall, and there were over 100 people that were there. The police officers had said if they had been even made aware that this tournament was taking place, they would have stationed 2 armed guards there just for normal patrol purposes for crowd control. And who knows what impact that may have had to have prevented this man that had some sort of psychological problem from going in there and shooting up the entire restaurant. Elijah.
That's pretty horrifying.
It's horrifying for his mother, Erin Reed, who thought her son was going to make a name for himself playing this video game, and then had to bury him, and her life will never be the same again.
That is really terrible. Well, good luck on that case. You know, Carl, in another conversation with you, you said, push forward, stay positive, keep the Lord close to your heart as part of your personal manifesto.
That is my personal mantra. I have to stay positive. I survived brain surgery, which had a significant impact on my life, and it taught me the importance of keeping the Lord close to you. Because without my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ looking over me, I could very well have been dead today. And it's also important for me to pass it on, to keep the skills and the benefits of your life and to pass it on to someone else. I am not here on my own. I am here talking to you, being able to accomplish all the things that I have in my life because someone ahead of me looked at me, reached back, and pulled me forward.
Well, you've always been very kind to me. I never lost track of you, even before you got famous, because the first day I met you, I was crazy about you. I liked you all the time.
Well, thank you so much.
I never lost track of you, and you've always been very nice to me. So. And
it's amazing how you've always kept your good looks. You're as good as now you did years and years. I won't say that years ago, but years ago in college.
Well, mutual admiration there. You look fabulous. So you believe in the power of prayer, don't you, Carl?
I pray every day, thanking the Lord for just allowing me to wake up today. When I wake up, it's a good day because not everyone has that benefit and that positive energy. So yes, it is always very important to me to remember that I'm not here by myself, that the good Lord is the reason I continue to live and do the things I can do every day.
All right, now I'm going to let you go, but I just want to ask you one quirky question. What was your favorite toy as a little boy?
My favorite toy as a little boy probably was the first time I got a basketball, because I lived down the street from a high school, and we would go to the gym and play basketball virtually every day of my summer when I was growing up. I am a basketball fanatic to this day. My two passions are sports and law. And I think having a basketball when I was 8 years old, and it was leather, and you had to play inside because it was a real basketball, was my most favorite toy of all time. Now, I have never been asked that question. Thank you for that.
Well, I had to know. I just had to know. Well, thank you so much for being with me today, Carl. I'm sure you're going to be an inspiration to so many people. We're so much more than this moment. And we have lived all these years, and we know how a lot of the story is turning out. And you have done a magnificent job. I am so proud of you and so impressed with your awesomeness. You've really done a fine, fine job so far. And I'm looking forward to seeing the rest.
Well, thank you so much. And thank me so much for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Bye, Carl.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for joining us. That was Carl Douglas, the OJ attorney, and so much more. And we'll see you next time on What It Takes to Be Great.